After lunch in Karanak on July the 13th, we made the long drive to Zagreb, Croatia, arriving there just before dinner time. After checking into the impressive Zagreb Palace Hotel, we took a short orientation walk in the area near the hotel. On the morning of July 14th, we took a more extensive tour of the city, taking the 2-minute ride on the funicular to the old city and then wandering the streets until we arrived at the Zagreb Cathedral. Zagreb is the capital and the largest city of Croatia. It is the biggest metropolitan area in Croatia and the only one with a population of over 1 million. It is a fascinating city with much old world charm and is perhaps my favorite of all the cities that we visited. Mirogaj is a fascinating, incredibly ornate cemetery opened in the 19th century. Interred there are members of all religious groups. Non-religious graves can also be found. In the arcades are the last resting places of many famous Croatians. Unlike the older cemeteries, which are church-owned, Mirogaj is owned by the city of Zagreb. The Zagreb Archaeological Museum near our hotel was moderately interesting. The exhibits I had most interest in were the ancient Roman and Egyptian ones. The most famous relic at the museum, and perhaps in all of Croatia, is the Zagreb mummy. This mummified body was bought in Egypt in 1848, and yet the mummy is Etruscan and had no business being in Egypt. The Zagreb mummy, like many celebrities, is actually most famous for her clothes. After her owner died, it was discovered that the bandages the mummy was wrapped in are actually strips of a book made of linen. This book is the longest preserved text in the Etruscan language and appears to be something similar to a liturgical calendar. The mummy is on permanent display, but her bonds are locked away and only revealed to experts. On the morning of July 15th, we drove outside the city of Zagreb to a couple of villages near the Slovenian border. Our first stop was the tiny village of Klonjek, about 35 miles from Zagreb. Klonjek is noted as the birthplace of the internationally known Croatian sculptor Antun Augustinčić, as well as the location of a fascinating gallery of his works, which we visited. Our next stop was the tiny village of Kumrovec, about 5 miles from Klonjek. Kumrovec is noted as the birthplace of Josip Broz Tito, former leader of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. A living history museum is set up surrounding the house in which Tito was born and spent his childhood years. This site provided a fascinating glimpse into life in that part of the world in the early 20th century. After returning to Zagreb in the early afternoon, I took a solo walk through the city, seeing some new sights and revisiting in more detail some of the places we had visited on our city tour the day before. I just really fell in love with this city.
Pomolimo se, Bože koji si nam odignuo sahranu, ostavi uspomenu muke svoje, daj nam, molimo, tako čast sveta od tajstva tijela i krvi Tvoje, da vada osjećamo usadi plod potpočenja Tvojega, koji živiš i kraljuješ u vijeke vjekova.
Ne možeš prazne